Hi everyone. Wanted to talk today about one of the more interesting villains of the Hebrew scriptures. And, let's say you're reading through the Psalms, you come to Psalm 135. It's all about praise the name of the Lord, all the great things Yahweh, God of Israel, has done. And you're reading along and you read about these judgments and victories of Yahweh. So verse 8 says, He it was who struck down the firstborn of Egypt, both of man and of beast, who in your midst, O Egypt, sent signs and wonders against Pharaoh and all his servants. So this refers to the Exodus story, of course, where Pharaoh is judged, the gods of Egypt are judged with the 10 plagues. But it continues, who struck down many nations and killed mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan, and gave their land as a heritage to his people Israel. So you're thinking about talking about the great things that God has done and how Yahweh, God of Israel, is Lord above all gods and so forth. And this great victory against the Pharaoh. Now, of course, that's a very theologically significant thing in the biblical story. Exodus is a really big deal. But you think what's paired with this defeat of Pharaoh is this defeat of these mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. And you think, I might not remember who those are, but obviously the thing is they're a very big deal because there's not a lot of bad guys defeated by Yahweh that are named in the Psalms. Put in kind of a similar category of significance as Pharaoh here. So Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. Now I want to focus on Og, king of Bashan today. I want to talk about why that's so interesting. This character, this villain, his defeat by Yahweh is much like the defeat of Pharaoh, a demonstration of Yahweh's supremacy. Okay? It's just very interesting that these guys are mentioned in conjunction with the Exodus story villains. So this is Psalm 135, and actually Psalm 136 is very much similar. It will bring the mighty kings and the Pharaoh together again when talking about the greatness of God. And of course it connects these victories of God and the power that he demonstrates with his steadfast love that endures forever, which is kind of this refrain that repeats after each line. So, he does wonders, made the heavens, made the great lights, rules over the night. So then it gets to the Egypt stuff, and it says he struck down the firstborn of Egypt, so that's the 10th plague. Brought Israel out from among them, so he liberates the Israelites. Goes on, it says, to him who divided the Red Sea in two and made Israel pass through the midst of it. So that's interesting because it goes on to talk about the Pharaoh again and his host defeated at the Red Sea. And this Red Sea kind of raises the theological stakes because it's associating this victory with basically the sort of creation language that is used in the whole Red Sea incident. Because creation language, like if you think Genesis or something like Psalm 74, it talks about basically bringing up the land out of the waters, right? And that's essentially what the Red Sea story is about. It's about bringing up land or space for the people to cross, like the chaos waters, like the symbol of death and chaos, the dragon, so to speak. And of course, that's where Pharaoh is defeated. So it continues and it comes back to these mighty kings. And again, this is being associated with the reason why Yahweh is greatest of all. And also a demonstration of his steadfast love that endures forever. So Yahweh struck down great kings and killed mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. So those are the guys we read about in the previous psalm there, 135. So again, who are these guys? But in particular, like I said, we want to talk about Og because he's more interesting and it tells us a lot more about him overall. But, Og, Og's an interesting guy. We first learn about him in the book of Numbers. Okay, so they fight him in chapter 21 of the book of Numbers. So remember, they're out in the wilderness. Like, they're not able to enter the promised land because of their disobedience. So they have to wait and wander the wilderness for the 40 years. During that time, they have a number of important battles. Two of these battles take place in Numbers chapter 21. So there's a lot of interesting things that happen here, but what we care about is these battles against the kings. So, of course, we see King Sihon. Israel sent messengers to King Sihon of the Amorites saying, let me pass through. It's a problem. King Sihon's bad. They have to fight him, and they defeat him. And then, later, they will fight King Og. So here it says, starting at verse 31, thus Israel lived in the land of the Amorites, and Moses sent out spy Jazer, and they captured its villages and dispossessed the Amorites who were there. And they turned and went up by way to Bashan. And Og, the king of Bashan, came out against him, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. Edrei is the place of this battle. That's important. You want to remember that. That's an important place. So, but the Lord said to Moses, do not fear him, for I have given him into your hand and all his people and his land. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. So they defeated him and his sons and all his people until he had no survivor left, and they possessed his land. So they go up against Og, they defeat him, and they take his land, just as they did Sihon, king of the Amorites. So there's these two kings that were mentioned in the Psalms 135 and 136. Well, what's the big deal? Is this just some kind of random battle against some kings? Like, why is this so important? There's a few things we want to keep in mind. It's the place that Og is the king of. Okay? And within Bashan, they fight at Edrei. Another thing that's kind of hinted at here is the power of Og. Like, remember, the Israelites are basically this ragtag bunch of people who fled slavery. They, don't have a city or a kingdom or anything. They're just kind of wandering around with their portable temple in the Transjordan area. And they're going up against this great king. It seems to be implied that he's, much more powerful than him. But the Lord says to Moses, do not fear him. Like, I'll take care of it. If you're with me, you will defeat Og, just as you defeated Sihon. And Sihon would have been like this head of this, confederacy of kings, like really quite powerful. Again, we're focusing on Og, though, but it's important for the comparison. Another key word here that's important is going to be the Amorites, because we're going to see that Og's people, or Og is basically kind of a category of these Amorites, if you will. So, okay, I've highlighted a few things we want to make note of. Obviously, this is a big deal based on the Psalms. That they wouldn't be mentioned if there wasn't some deep theological significance here. But we don't seem to be able to pick up what it is just from the account in Numbers. But the thing is, you always have to use like different parts of the Bible to kind of understand other parts of the Bible, because a lot of things are spelled out in greater detail in different locations, because it's a collection of different books, right? Just one other thing that's kind of interesting. I think, I believe it's in here. Chapter 21. Yeah, it says, like, when it's kind of getting into this, it talks about, like, this book of the wars of Yahweh, or wars of the Lord. And, like, no one knows really what that book is. If if it existed in some kind of Israelite tradition or something, we don't have it. But apparently this stuff is important because it would have been part of this strange, mysterious book. And we never hear about this book again in all the biblical texts. So, what's up with that? Again, it's just something that kind of hints at the significance of the battle against these kings. So, Og, we're also going to learn about Og in a lot of more detail. Deuteronomy chapter 3. We're going to get a lot more details about King Og here. Some strange details and interesting details. Basically, this is the part we care about. Verses 1 through 11 of Deuteronomy 3. Let's read through most of it. And Deuteronomy, just to kind of set up the context here, it's the Israelites are about to enter the Promised Land. The 40 years are over, and Moses delivers kind of this synopsis of things that have happened up to this point. So he's talked about, before this, in chapter 2, how they fought against Sihon, King Sihon, we remember him. Now it's going to talk about the defeat of King Og. So chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "Then we turned and went up the way to Bashan. And Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to me, Do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. So the Lord our God gave into our hand Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we struck him down until he had no survivor left. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city that we did not take from them. 60 cities, the whole region of Argob, the kingdom of Og of Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, besides very many unwalled villages, and we devoted them to destruction, as we did to Sihon the king of Heshbon, devoting to destruction every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the spoils of the cities we took as our plunder. So we took the land at the time out of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians call Hermon Sirion, while the Amorites call it Senir. Verse 10, all the cities of the tableland and all Gilead, as far as Salca and Edrei, remember that. Cities of the kingdom of Og in Bashan, for only Og. Okay, now this is the weird part. We'll come back to this in a moment. But just stopping before verse 11 here, we see a few things. So we know Og is the king of Bashan, right? Og, king of Bashan, came out against us and they battled at Edrei. So we saw that, right? Saw how he defeated them like he defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites. Totally wiped them out. And in terms of kind of power levels, if you want to measure power levels of mighty kings in the Bible, it's by number of cities. And Og has 60 cities, and these are like war fortresses, fortified with high walls, gates, and bars. That's basically what a city is in kind of Old Testament context and thinking. So these are like fortified structures meant for, like with soldiers, armies, that kind of thing. And of course, it's distinguishing from unwalled villages. This is important. We devoted them to destruction. Okay? The footnote is that is set apart, devoted as an offering to the Lord for destruction. It's the term for this is in Hebrew, like what is it? Harem. This. This is the word. So this is an interesting word. It's like the footnote said, it's set apart for the Lord, but not in the holiness sense, the way something holy is set apart for the Lord, like a people or an object or what have you. This is kind of the opposite. Set apart the Lord for destruction. It means to be put under the ban. So it's bad. If it's a war of Kerem, you're in a lot of trouble. Now, continuing on. What did they do? Mount Hermon is going to be important. So keep in mind, Mount Hermon is in the land of Bashan that they're conquering. This is important. Blah, blah, blah. So here's the thing. There's another thing here. Cities of the kingdom. Hang on, where is it? Oh, yeah. This is important. So remember how it said, you've got Og of Bashan, you've got Sihon, king of the Amorites. But here it says they're both being called Amorites. So these two kings are both Amorite kings. Now, all that kind of hopefully parked in your head for a bit of further development. I want to go now to verse 11. This is a bizarre verse. It's a very strange detail to just kind of throw in here. So it says, "For only Og, the king of Bashan, was the last remnant of the Rephaim." The Rephaim, what is that? It continues, "Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit." So this giant bed, I think there's probably so a cubit is about 1.5 feet. So 9 cubits, like, what's that, like 15 or 16 feet? That's a very big bed. So the writer believes it is important to tell us about this bed. It's just kind of a weird detail to throw in there. It's an iron bed, and it's a very big bed. So it might be for like a 15-foot tall person or something, or just maybe some big bed for other purposes. Some of us have king-size beds, and they're very nice and big. But I don't think it's just about the fact that his bed was big. There's some significance here that is entailed by the details given about the bed. We'll come back to that. But keep in mind, he was the last of the Rephaim. Only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. So Rephaim, there's some remnant. Og is the last one. And what the heck are the Rephaim? Well, we actually get some more information about this in the previous chapter when they're recounting the wilderness years. So I want to read starting at verse 8 here. Or I guess this is verse 9. Oh yeah, verse 8 and 9. "And we turned and went in the direction of wilderness of Moab. And God said to me, not to harass Moab or contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar to the people of Lot for a possession." Okay, whatever. Then verse 10 says, "The Emim formerly lived there, a people great and many, as tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also counted as Rephaim. But the Moabites call them Emim." So here's Rephaim, and they're connected with the Anakim and these Emim. Continues, "The Horites also lived in Seir formerly, but the people of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them, and settled in their place, as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave to them. Now rise up and go over the brook at Zered." So we went over the brook at Zered, and the time from our leaving, blah, blah, blah. Actually, I want to jump ahead a bit, because there's more battles. It's going to talk about the Rephaim again. So it says, "When you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them or contend with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon for your possession. because I've given it to the sons of Lot for possession. It is also counted as the land of Rephaim. Rephaim formerly lived there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzummim, a people great and many, as tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, and they possessed them and settled in their place, as he did for the people of Esau who live in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites before them, and dispossessed them and settled into their place even to this day. It's going to continue with some interesting things, but we can kind of leave that aside for now. The main point you want to catch is that the Rephaim are being connected with the Anakim, and they've got all these different kind of names for Rephaim depending on kind of the people referencing them. So Emim or Zamzummim, these people groups are connected, and they're great and many and as tall as the Anakim. Now this is very strange. Who are the Anakim? Well, let's look it up. Anakim. What? So, Anakim, that's like plural of Anak, right? So, what's up with that? Well, this comes up. Oh, hang on. What am I doing here? This is what we're looking for. Sorry, I kind of got retarded for a second. It's Numbers 13:33. This is when they send scouts into the promised land. So again, they're wandering, or before they're cursed to wander, as they're scoping out the promised land, they send in these scouts. And the scouts come back, well, except for two of the scouts, who are confident in the promise of Yahweh. All the scouts are very upset because they say in the land they scouted, they saw the Nephilim, and it clarifies the sons of Anak who came from the Nephilim. And we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. I mean, a few interesting points here. So here we're getting Anak. The Anakim, sons of Anak, are connected with Nephilim. And the reason they're cursed is because basically they were too afraid to go fight these Anakim, who are basically, from what we're seeing, some kind of like giants, because they're described here as so big compared to the Israelites, and they were described as so tall and strong in Deuteronomy 2. And of course, Nephilim, well, a lot of people are familiar with that idea. But we don't need the word study. We can close up some of these. Just look at this, okay? Nephilim is a word that only shows up a couple of times, and one of the times is that Numbers 13:33. The other place is Genesis 6, so very early, all the way back in the primordial history, and even before the flood. In verses 1 through 4 of chapter 6, we read, "When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of Anak saw that the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown." So this is the only other place where you get this word in the Bible, and it's in a lot of ways it's a mystery as to what it is. But a lot of English translations, because there's so much controversy about what it means, they'll just transliterate the Hebrew, so you get Nephilim. But we've got a footnote here, and it says, or giants. Giants. Well, that's kind of correlating with those descriptions of the great height. Might even be connected to the idea of Og's bed, because he had such a big bed. Why would they think giants? Like, what's going on here? What's with the footnote? Well, What's the best way to kind of show this? Maybe, here, text comparison. So this is Genesis 4, where the Nephilim were Nephilim, right. Anyway, so you can see Nephilim. I've got a few translations up here. Nephilim is just transliterated in some cases, but in the King James Version, it's translated as giants. Now where would they get that idea? Well, the King James Bible is based predominantly or very significantly on the Greek text, so more leaning on the Septuagint translation, or the Septuagint version of the Old Testament. So that's like the Greek translation of the Hebrew. Very ancient. In the Septuagint, which might as well just bring it up here, Genesis 6:2, now giants were on the earth in those days. That's Nephilim. But in Greek, they put gigantes, so giants. That's where they get that. So the King James translators, kind of going by the tradition behind the Septuagint, the original translators of the Septuagint, which is centuries before Christ, they chose the Greek word for giants when they wanted to translate the Hebrew word Nephilim. So this is pretty weird and crazy. Like, what's going on? Well, it seems that Og, our guy, last of the Rephaim, is one of these giants, right? And the Rephaim are kind of the subcategory of giants, perhaps, like within the broader category of, the Anakim or the sons of Anak. Perhaps you have the Amorites, or and then Rephaim is a subcategory of that. But there's some kind of giant thing going on here. And that's very interesting, and it makes it kind of more significant, the fact that they defeat Og and Sihon, because Og and Sihon, if they're giants, in some sense they may be connected with, this divine transgression, where these angelic beings, again, angels of God is what they use in the Septuagint, instead of, where's our, what are we looking for? Oh yeah, English Standard Version. So sons of God, that's angels of God in the text comparison with the Greek. So there's some idea of like some kind of transgression involving angels and humans copulating or something and producing these giants. It's very significant. Now, if you think about it, it's directly before the flood. Immediately after verses 1 through 4 of Genesis 6, verse 5 says, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every intention of the thoughts in his heart was only evil continually." And he decides there needs to be a flood to deal with the total spiritual corruption of the earth. And it seems to be a cause and effect thing. Like, it's describing what happened, this transgression and these giants, and then wickedness spreads, sin spreads. And the response has to be something as, epically cosmic as flooding the earth to wipe out the wickedness and save the creation, really. So that kind of gives this new sort of significance to this whole Og battle. And you can see why it would have been put in a category of importance along with Pharaoh and the Exodus stuff. Like the way it's connected there in those two Psalms we looked at, 135 and 136. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can explore with this whole idea about giants and Og, Rephaim. We'll just look at a few other things that are kind of interesting, and we'll connect it actually to the New Testament story. Because you might wonder, well, who cares about this? Like, is this just crazy schizo talk? Well, Christ cared about this, and I'll show you why. Let's just do a bit of setup here first. So, the reason these Amorites are a big deal, like Amorites is basically like Martu, like okay, how do I want to explain this? I'll just simplify it. Basically, the reason Og is a big deal is because ultimately the Rephaim and the Amorites connect to Babylon. So the Martu would have conquered Babylon at some point, and basically their claim to fame would have been that they, like say Og, his claim to power would be that he would possess, as the king of the Rephaim, king of these giants, he would possess, Babylonian secrets from before the flood. That's kind of the idea. So when you see, giants and Amorites, you want to think Babylon. Babylon is the pedigree of these people. And of course, Babylon is the anti-Israel. It's the anti-Eden. It's the anti-Yahweh kingdom. In terms of archetype and imagery and symbolism. What it is, it's the archetypal enemy of God, okay? And these giants are ultimately connected to Babylon. I can maybe unpack that some other time, but we'll take it for granted for now. Now let's just look at a few other quick things here. Actually, the whole bed of iron thing, this might show up in a commentary. I'm just going to pull something up for this verse here, okay? I'm sure there's a lot of weird crap about it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what do we got? This might be good. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with this so it'll work better. Why didn't that open? Oh, I see the problem. What the hell's going on here? Oh, okay, I forgot how to use this program for a second. I'm stupid. Okay, so here's just something straightforward here from New American Commentary. This is pretty standard in the scholarship. So, blah, blah, blah. This information led Moses, or more likely a later commentator, to provide further information about Og, who clearly was an object of much curious reflection. He was the last of the Rephaites, the giants who inhabited the Transjordan in the time immemorial. So large was he that he required a bed of 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. So apparently it's almost like they take it as this trophy, and the writer or the supplementer or the redactor or whatever who, the people who put together the final version or the final form of the fifth book of Moses here, they give us this detail about this, and apparently it's at whatever time that is, it's still on exhibit in the Ammonite city Rabbah in his own time. So very interesting. There's a lot to the bed because I wonder if okay, I don't know if there's like something for that. So like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, they dug up the ziggurat of Entomonaki. It's sort of like at the border of Iraq and Persia, so ancient Babylon, really. And they found a bed in there that had the same measurements as Og's bed. Now, it doesn't mean it was Og's bed, but it's interesting that this Babylonian site had a bed like this, and in one of the old Mesopotamian tablets, they've got a description of Marduk's wedding bed. So the Mesopotamian god Marduk, king of the gods, his bed has the same measurements in one of the tablets. I forget the reference off the top of my head. But that's very weird. Again, that goes to the Babylon connection. Like, these people are from Babylon. And you think, like, Marduk's wedding bed is not just a nice place to sleep. That would be where, dark rituals would take place. And rituals of that sort would perhaps be an explanation for how you get things like rebel angels copulating with humanity, or rebel divine beings copulating with human women to produce these giants. Just something to think about, like these kind of different connections you want to correlate. Anyway, let's get back to Og here for a second. So I said Bashan is important, Mount Hermon is important, and Edrei is important. So these are all very interesting things. Joshua is going to elaborate on this a bit. What is it, 12? Yeah, so after Joshua's initial campaigns in the Promised Land, and they defeat a lot of mighty kings, they will recount some of these victories. You get a huge list, all in all 31 kings in Joshua chapter 12 of all the kings defeated, but there's basically no details given about them, except there's a lot of detail given for Sihon and this guy, Og, king of Bashan. We get a couple of interesting extra details in this recap. So Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim, we've seen about that. Now he lived at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and he ruled over Mount Hermon. This is all very interesting stuff. So there's a few crazy things going on here. So first of all, remember, he's the king of Bashan. King of Bashan. This is in the Transjordan. Let's see. Bring up an atlas here for a sec. So the Transjordan area is like this kind of area, because you've got the source of the Jordan. It goes down, goes through the Sea of Galilee. You get the Dead Sea, Dead Sea here, or what are these? Yeah, sorry, Dead Sea's down there. You get Sea of Galilee. I'm all mixed up. And the rivers, come out of Mount Hermon, which is kind of interesting. We'll talk about that momentarily. Mount Hermon, you can see, is here. Now, mountains in this kind of ancient Near East area, there's a lot of mountains they would feel to us like hills, like if you live near the mountains of North America, Rocky Mountains. But Mount Hermon is a serious mountain. Like, it's the biggest mountain in the area, so it's a big deal. But Bashan would be kind of this area here. And Sihon would have ruled more down here. But do we have to zoom in more? Okay, hang on. Let's see. Defeat Sihon and Og. So you can see that's where this is going down. They come up. They fight Sihon along the way. And remember, they fought Og at Edrei, where King Og resided. And there's Ashtaroth, that other place we mentioned. So they fight here, and Ashtaroth is another one of these places where Og dwells. Now this is interesting because these places are pretty significant in the old kind of Canaanite religions. These areas were full of death cults, like necromantic cults, because this was considered like, the Mordor of the Old Testament. Like, this is a dark, evil, scary land of dark spirits. And if you look at like Ugaritic texts, Ashtaroth and Edrei, among other places, are considered gateways to the underworld, so gateways to the realm of the dead. And it's very interesting, of course, that they fight Og at one of these places. So basically, it's like this showdown at the gates of darkness or the gates of hell, and you can think of Og almost like this gatekeeper to the underworld, or like this dark chaos warrior guy. So very kind of cool. And of course, he ruled over Mount Bashan, which is a detail. Not just that Bashan is there, but in some sense, he lets us know that he ruled over it, Mount Hermon, which is kind of like the northern end of Bashan here. There's the promised land they're going to take. All this stuff. Hill country, this is where they have to fight a lot of giants. So Mount Hermon is a very interesting place for a number of reasons. We saw in Genesis 1 through 6 this idea of rebel sons of God or angels and their transgression and copulation with human women ends up creating these kind of giant characters, of which Og is one. In Jewish tradition, like if you look at the book of Enoch, which elaborates on the whole tradition behind the Genesis 1 through 6 thing, or Genesis 6 verse 1 through 4 thing, the site at which the rebel angels come down and kind of form their alliance to commit all this wickedness and rebel against the Most High, that happens at Mount Hermon. They come down there. And Mount Hermon is actually a word that's connected to that previous word we saw, like Kerem. Hermon would be like the cursed mountain, or the mountain of curses. So, pretty interesting. And Mount Bashan is a pretty big deal in the ancient world. Like if you look up pictures of it, you can see like it would have been a focus of spiritual activity. Like there's all these little kind of carve outs in the mountain where they would have had all these pagan shrines dedicated to different spiritual beings, and a place of kind of dark power and dark spiritual encounters. Basically a terrifying evil place, probably the worst place, top 3 at least, worst place for the ancient Israelite thinker. Okay, so I mentioned before that Christ actually cared about all these kind of weird details, but you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Now, Mount Hermon is associated with all these terrible things, and it's the place that Og ruled over. But I want to, let's see, what can I do here? What we need is Caesarea Philippi. Okay, you can see Caesarea Philippi is at the foot of Mount Hermon. This is important because something very interesting in the New Testament happens at Caesarea Philippi. Okay? This is a critical place in our New Testament, in the ministry of Jesus. I want to go to Matthew 16. At one point, Jesus and his followers go into the district of Caesarea Philippi. We saw that this is at the base of Mount Hermon, right? And he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets." And he said to them, "Well, but who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, now check this out, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly charged the disciples not to tell no one that he was the Christ. So Jesus goes here at this critical moment of confession for Peter that Jesus is the Christ. Christ reveals this or confirms this literally at the foot of Mount Hermon. And not only that, it's interesting this is the gates of hell, because it's really gates of Hades in the Greek. It's just kind of a tradition that's a little buggered up for English translations that they go with hell. Hades is better because that's the realm of the underworld. And, Bashan was associated with, like, the underworld. It was the evil dark realm, right? So he makes this point, and it's just kind of interesting that these geographical locations are significant. But look what is at Caesarea Philippi. I wonder if actually there's a... okay, at Caesarea Philippi, hang on. Is there a thing for it here? Caesarea Philippi. Okay, now Caesarea Philippi is like a tourist location now. And quite significantly, there's this giant cave there. And this is where the Jordan comes out of. Is this going to load or what's up? Yeah, see there. This is a pretty good shot because you can see like some of the, ruins or whatever of the mountain or the ancient city. And you got like kind of this lower part of Mount Hermon here. And you can see like these little carve outs. I wonder if there's maybe a better picture here. I don't know, but you can see there's the little places where the shrines would have been put in the side of the mountain. And you can also see these, like this giant cave, right? Because this is the source of the river. But this is called Panias. Here you go. Sacred areas beside Grotto of Pan at Caesarea Philippi. Again, this is a tourist location now. This was considered a gateway to the underworld. Pan, like that little devilish demonic figure, this would have been like his abode, or he hung out here. This was associated with him. So this was kind of a devilish demonic area. Of course, that makes sense in light of the whole Mount Hermon thing. But think about this. Christ is here. And he's talking about the gates of hell and how the church will be strong against the gates of hell. And he's doing it right here at the gates of hell, like in the mind of the ancient person at the time. This is where he's making this declaration. On this rock I will build my church. What an interesting thing to say, standing before the literal gates of hell, or the gates of Hades, a gateway to the underworld. Christ is here to defeat death. He's here to defeat the dark spiritual forces, and he's basically going right up to their front door to announce, yo, you guys are toast. You guys are in a lot of trouble right now. Like, Christ is here. The Messiah has come. Judgment is nigh. And if that sounds kind of weird, I want you to think just a little further, because what happens right after this whole thing? I mean, it's interesting that basically says the church will beat death, but immediately after he foretells his death and resurrection. So his disciples are probably very confused, like, you're going to defeat the powers of darkness, but you're going to die and come back to life. Like, how does this make sense? I don't really get it. And he kind of gives them a hard time about it because his disciples have trouble really figuring out what's really going on until they see the culmination of things. But right after all this, you get the Transfiguration in chapter 17. It says, and after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. Okay? So his transfiguration, his revealing of who he really is, like showing this divine glory of God in a way that hasn't been revealed yet. This happens on a high mountain, and of course, happening after what we just saw, you think, well, what mountain goes up to? It's not really specified. And regardless of what different traditions might say, just think about it. They're at Caesarea Philippi. What's the nearest mountain? What's the highest mountain? Caesarea Philippi, well, Mount Hermon. And why wouldn't Christ undertake his transfiguration on the cursed mountain? It's basically a declaration that he's taking back the profane territory. All belongs to him. He is given dominion over all. What an amazing way to make that statement, but to bring all these ideas together in these geographical associations, and to reveal himself on the cursed mountain where the rebel angels came down, which spawned the great theological enemies of the Israelite people, the giants, the enemies of God. Just as the Israelites defeated the giants before, Christ is going to defeat like the next level of spiritual evil, ultimate spiritual evil, the all-time enemy. So it's just kind of ramping things up, and it's interesting that it all kind of comes together. It's just really interesting to think about. It all ties into kind of, that Og thing, like this weird giant king guy that they defeat, who's very important enough to be mentioned in these Psalms along with the Pharaoh. Very cool, super cool. Hope you found it a little bit interesting. Talk to you next time.